The hidden stronghold. The forest deepened around them as they rode north, following paths only Alluria could see. The corrupted trees pressed closer, their twisted branches forming a canopy so thick that even midday felt like dusk. The temperature had dropped further, their breath misting in air that should have been warm with summer. Edrick rode at the front with Alluria, the amulet heavy in his saddlebag. Its pulsing had become constant now, a rhythm like a heartbeat that seemed to sync with his own. Behind them, Rose kept watch on their flanks while Shamaz cradled the unconscious girl across his saddle, his healing magic maintaining a golden glow around her corrupted wound. "How much farther?" Edrick asked, his voice low. Alluria's dark eyes scanned the forest ahead, reading signs invisible to the others. 2 hours, maybe 3. The paths shift, but I know the markers. My people made sure of that. "Your people?" Rose said from behind. "In all the years we fought together, you never mentioned them, never said you had a stronghold hidden out here." "Would you have believed me?" Alluria glanced back, her expression unreadable. The descendant of an empire that fell 3,000 years ago, claiming her ancestors survived in secret? It sounds like a child's tale. "Everything sounds like a tale until it tries to kill you," Shamaz muttered, adjusting the girl's weight. She had begun to tremble, her skin growing colder despite his warming spells. "This child needs treatment soon. The corruption is spreading faster than I can contain it." Edrick studied the girl's face, so young, perhaps 17, with features that should have been peaceful in unconsciousness, but instead twisted with silent agony. The mark on her shoulder had grown, dark veins spreading like roots beneath her skin. "Will your people be able to help her?" "If anyone can, it's them." Alluria raised her hand, signaling them to stop. "We're close now. From here, we walk." They dismounted, securing their horses to trees that looked less corrupted than the rest. Alluria moved to a massive oak, its trunk scarred with age, and placed her palm against the bark in a specific pattern. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shimmered, like heat rising from stone, and the forest ahead seemed to ripple and rearrange itself. 3,000 years, Alluria said quietly, and the wards still hold. My ancestors built well. A path appeared where none had been visible before, winding between trees that now stood straighter, their bark free of corruption. The temperature rose slightly, and the oppressive weight that had pressed on them since entering the forest lifted just enough to breathe easier. "Stay close," Alluria warned. "The wards don't distinguish between friend and foe. They only recognize blood." She led them down the hidden path, her hand trailing along trees that bore symbols carved deep into their bark. The same symbols Edrick had seen on the amulet. The forest around them grew brighter, not with natural light, but with a soft luminescence that seemed to emanate from the very air. After 20 minutes of walking, the trees parted to reveal a sight that stole Edric's breath. The stronghold wasn't a castle or fortress in the traditional sense. It was a city carved into and grown from the forest itself. Massive trees formed living walls, their branches woven together in patterns that spoke of both nature and deliberate design. Buildings of white stone nestled among the roots, their architecture ancient and elegant, bearing the same symbols that covered the amulet. Bridges of living wood connected different levels, and gardens grew in impossible places, fed by streams that ran clear and pure. But it was the people that drew Edric's attention. Dozens of them moved through the stronghold with practiced efficiency. Men and women with dark skin like Alluria's, dressed in clothing that mixed practical leather with fabric of deep blues and greens. They moved with the same fluid grace Alluria possessed, and their eyes held the same keen intelligence. One of them, a woman with silver-streaked hair and bearing that spoke of authority, approached. She studied Alluria for a long moment, then spoke in a language Edrick didn't recognize, fluid and musical, with consonants that clicked softly. Alluria responded in kind, gesturing to the group behind her. The older woman's eyes widened when they fell on Shamaz and the girl he carried, then narrowed with concern when she saw the corruption spreading through the child's veins. She switched to the common tongue, her accent precise. "I am Elder Ashara. Alluria tells me you carry one marked by the ancient darkness. Bring her quickly. Our healers may yet save her." 2 younger Yurith moved forward. taking the girl gently from Shamaz and carrying her toward one of the white stone buildings. Shamaz followed, his healer's instincts overriding his exhaustion. Elder Ashara turned her attention to Edrick, and he felt the weight of her gaze. "So, you are the king Alluria has spoken of in her reports, the one who carries the burden of the Stormmoor line." "Reports?" Rose's hand moved to her sword hilt. "You've been reporting to them?" "Peace, warrior." Ashara raised a hand. "Alluria has served your king faithfully for years, but she also serves her people, as she was raised to do. We needed to know when the time came, when the seals began to fail." Edric's jaw tightened. You knew the seals were failing and said nothing?" "We knew they would fail eventually. 3,000 years is not forever, despite what your ancestors hoped." Ashara's expression was grave. "Come, there is much to discuss, and little time." The darkness grows stronger with each passing hour. She led them deeper into the stronghold, past curious Yurith, who watched with guarded interest. They entered a large circular building, its walls carved with scenes that depicted a great war. Armies falling before shadowy figures, cities burning, and finally a ritual of binding performed by figures who bore crowns. "The last war," Ashara said, gesturing to the carvings. 3,000 years ago, when the Devourer rose from the depths and consumed everything in its path. 7 kingdoms stood against it. 7 kingdoms fell. Edric studied the carvings, his blood running cold. One of the crowned figures looked familiar. The face was different, but the bearing, the stance, even the way he held his sword. "My ancestor," he breathed. "King Edrick the Sealer," Ashara confirmed. "First king of Stormmoor, though your kingdom didn't exist yet. He was king of Thornhaven then, and he led the final ritual that bound the Devourer." Rose moved closer to the carvings, studying them intently. "If they bound it, why is it breaking free? Because they couldn't destroy it." Ashara's voice was heavy with old sorrow. "The Devourer is not a creature or even a demon. It is older. It exists outside the normal laws of death and life. So instead of killing it, they sealed it, binding it with their own bloodlines as anchors." The amulet in Edric's saddlebag pulsed violently, and he pulled it out. In the light of the stronghold, its symbols glowed brighter, and the whispers grew clearer. He could almost understand them now. "The bloodline anchors," Edric said slowly, pieces falling into place. "That's why it's awakening now. The bloodlines are weakening. Diluted over 3,000 years, yes." Ashara nodded. "Each generation, the binding grows weaker. We Yurith survived because we kept our bloodline pure, maintained the old ways. But the other kingdoms, Thornhaven became Stormmoor, changed, evolved. The blood thinned." "So what happens when it breaks free completely?" Rose demanded. Ashara gestured to the later carvings, scenes of devastation that made even Rose pale. "What happened before? The Devourer doesn't just kill, it consumes. Flesh, soul, memory, everything. It leaves nothing behind, not even ruins, just absence." Shamaz entered, his face drawn with exhaustion. "The girl will live, though the corruption has marked her permanently. Your healers are skilled, Elder. They saved her when I could not." "We have had 3,000 years to perfect our craft," Ashara said. "Fighting corruption is our oldest art. But she is fortunate you found her when you did. Another hour, and even we could not have helped." "The cultists," Alluria said. "There are more of them, aren't there? More rituals being performed?" "Many more." Ashara's expression darkened. "They seek to accelerate the awakening, to feed the Devourer's power with blood sacrifice. We have tracked 3 major groups operating in Silverthorn alone, and reports suggest more throughout the kingdom." Edric's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "Then we hunt them down. We stop them." "You cannot stop them all," Ashara said gently. "There are too many, too scattered. But you can stop the awakening itself, if you're willing to pay the price." The chamber fell silent. Even the forest outside seemed to hold its breath. "What price?" Edric asked, though part of him already knew. Ashara moved to a pedestal at the chamber's center where a sword rested in a cradle of white stone. It was ancient, its blade etched with the same symbols as the amulet, and it radiated power that made the air shimmer. "The sealing blade," she said, "forged by King Edrick himself in the final days of the war. It is the key to the binding, both to maintain it and to break it permanently." "Break it?" Rose stepped forward. "You mean kill the Devourer?" "Yes, but the blade requires a sacrifice to activate its full power. Ashara's eyes fixed on Edric. It requires the blood of Aldrich's line, given willingly, given completely. One of his descendants must take up the blade and face the devourer directly. If they succeed, the creature dies permanently. If they fail, the binding shatters completely, Shamaz finished, his voice hollow, and nothing stands between the devourer and the world. Edric stared at the sword, understanding settling over him like a shroud. This was his burden. This was why his bloodline had endured for 3,000 years, not as rulers, but as guardians, as the final failsafe against an ancient evil. "How long do we have?" he asked. Ashara consulted markings on the wall, her expression growing grimmer. "Days, perhaps a week. The seals are failing rapidly, and the cultist rituals are accelerating the process. Soon the devourer will be strong enough to break free on its own." Rose moved to Edric's side, her hand on his shoulder. "We face this together. We always have." "No." Edric's voice was firm. "This is my burden, Rose. My bloodline, my responsibility." "Your burden, our fight," Alluria said, stepping forward. "You didn't ask to be born into this, Edric, but you're not facing it alone." Shamaz nodded. "Where you go, we go. That was our oath, remember? Through darkness and light, until the end." Edric looked at his 3 companions, the friends who had become his family. They had followed him through countless battles, trusted him with their lives, and now they would stand with him against an evil that had destroyed kingdoms. "Then we prepare," he said, turning back to Elder Ashara. "What do we need to know? How do we fight something that can't be killed by normal means?" Ashara smiled grimly. "That, King of Stormmoor, is a long conversation. Come, we have much to discuss and little time. The devourer stirs, and when it wakes fully, all the world will know terror." As they followed her deeper into the stronghold, Edric glanced back at the sealing blade. It seemed to pulse in time with the amulet, both artifacts calling to something in his blood. His ancestor had sealed the devourer 3,000 years ago, buying humanity time. Now it fell to Edric to finish what Aldrich had started, to end the threat permanently, or die trying. The weight of 3,000 years of history pressed down on him, but he straightened his shoulders and walked forward. Behind him, his companions followed without hesitation. Whatever came next, they would face it as they always had, together unto the very end.